I need to tell you something that happened on my shift last month, and I'm still not sure I believe it myself. But every nurse who was there that night saw it. We all did, and we made a pact never to speak about it outside our group. Until now. My name is Sarah, and I've been a night shift nurse at St. Helena's Hospital for 7 years. I've seen things that would make your skin crawl. I've held hands with dying patients, I've witnessed miracles, and I've learned that hospitals after midnight are a completely different world. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on October 23rd. It started like any other Friday night. The ER was packed with the usual weekend chaos: drunk drivers, bar fights, a guy who thought he could fly off his roof. I was assigned to the 4th floor, the cardiac unit, which was usually quiet. That's where we kept the post-op patients, the ones recovering from heart surgeries, the elderly folks with pacemakers. Peaceful, predictable. Except that night, room 412 had a new patient. His name was Marcus Webb, 73 years old, admitted for chest pain and irregular heartbeat. Nothing unusual in his chart. Retired postal worker, lived alone, no next of kin listed. When I went to check his vitals at 11 p.m., he was sitting up in bed, wide awake, staring at the wall. "Can't sleep, Mr. Webb?" I asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around his arm. He didn't answer right away, just kept staring at that wall like it was showing him something I couldn't see. Then, very slowly, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were different, not the eyes of a sick old man. They were alert, intense, almost predatory. "Do you believe in debts, nurse?" he asked. "I've learned not to engage too deeply with patients' late-night philosophical questions. Your blood pressure looks good. Can I get you anything to help you sleep?" "Debts that follow you," he continued, ignoring my question. "Debts that don't care how much time has passed. Debts that always come due." A chill ran down my spine. But I kept my professional smile. "Try to get some rest. Mr. Webb, I'll check on you in a couple of hours." As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong, too strong for someone with heart problems. "She's coming," he whispered. "Tonight, she's finally coming." I gently removed his hand and left the room, my heart pounding. I'd dealt with confused patients before, people on heavy medications who said strange things, but something about Marcus Webb felt different. Actually, the nurse's station, I found my colleague, James, a guy who'd been working night shift even longer than me. "Hey, you ever get a weird vibe from a patient?" I asked. "Every night," he laughed. "Why?" "Room 412. New admit, says someone's coming for him tonight." James shrugged. "Probably dementia. Check his meds." But I couldn't shake the feeling. I pulled up Marcus Webb's file on the computer and started reading. Standard medical history, nothing alarming. Then I scrolled down to the notes section and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a police report attached from 1987. Marcus Webb had been questioned in connection with a missing persons case. A young woman named Elena Vasquez had disappeared after her shift at the post office where Marcus worked. She was never found. Marcus was cleared due to lack of evidence. But the detective's notes included a chilling line. Subject showed no emotion when discussing victim. Maintained eye contact throughout interview. Something not right here. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Was I reading too much into this? It was almost 40 years ago. The man was never charged. But that look in his eyes? Those words. "She's coming." At 1 a.m., all the lights on the 4th floor went out. Not just dimed completely black. Emergency generators should have kicked in immediately, but nothing happened. The entire floor was plunged into darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. "Sarah," James's voice called out from somewhere in the black. "What the hell?" "Stay calm," I called back, reaching for my phone to use as a flashlight. But my phone was dead, completely drained, even though it had been at 87% just minutes before. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the hallway, but not normal footsteps. These sounded wet, like someone walking in soaked shoes, leaving puddles with each step. "James," I whispered. "Is that you?" "I'm at the station," he hissed back. "I'm not moving." The footsteps continued, getting closer. And then I heard something else. A woman's voice singing softly in Spanish. "Ah, lullaby." My grandmother used to sing me the same song when I was little. "Duérmete, mi niña." Duérmete mi sol. The emergency lights finally flickered on, bathing everything in eerie red, and that's when I saw her. At the end of the hallway, standing in front of room 412, was a woman. She was wearing a postal worker's uniform from the 1980s, the old-styled navy blue one. Her long black hair hung wet and dripping around her face, and she was staring directly at me. But here's the thing that made my legs nearly give out. She was translucent. I could see the wall behind her, right through her body. "Do you see that?" James's voice cracked from behind me. "Yeah," I breathed. "I see it." The woman raised her hand and pointed at room 412. Then she started walking toward the door, her wet footsteps leaving dark marks on the linoleum floor. As she moved, the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I'm a nurse. I had patients on this floor. Whatever was happening, I couldn't just abandon them. I forced my legs to move, following the apparition down the hall. Behind me, I heard James radioing for security, his voice shaking. But I kept walking, drawn forward by something I couldn't explain. The woman passed right through the closed door of room 412. I heard Marcus Webb scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the sound of pure, absolute terror. The kind of scream that comes from your soul, not your lungs. I burst through the door, and what I saw inside that room will haunt me for the rest of my life. Marcus was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide with horror, his mouth open in a continuous scream. The woman was standing at the foot of his bed, just watching him. Water was pouring from her hair, her clothes pooling on the floor. But it wasn't regular water. It was dark, murky, filled with sediment. "Elena!" Marcus gasped. "Elena, please! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The woman tilted her head, and for the first time, I could see her face clearly. She was beautiful, probably had been in her late 20s when she died, but her skin had a blue-gray pallor, and her eyes were completely black, like deep wells of nothing. "You took everything from me," she said, her voice echoing as if she was speaking from the bottom of a lake. "My life, my future, my family." "I didn't mean to," Marcus sobbed. "You were going to report me. The money I took, it would have ruined me." My mind was racing, trying to process what I was hearing. Marcus had killed her over stolen money, and he'd hidden her body somewhere it had taken almost 40 years to ... To what? "Come back," where Elena's ghost demanded. "Where is my body?" "Marcus, my mother died never knowing what happened to me. My sister spent her whole life searching." "Where?" Marcus was crying now, his heart monitor beeping frantically. "The lake?" he choked out. "Miller's Lake. I weighted you down with chains." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I was young and stupid and scared. The ghost moved closer, and I could smell it now, the smell of stagnant water, of decay, of death. "Sorry doesn't bring back 38 years, she hissed. "Sorry doesn't give me back my life." She reached out her hand toward Marcus's chest. Wait, I heard myself shout. Both the ghost and Marcus turned to look at me. "Elena," I said, my voice shaking, "I can help. I can make sure they find you. I can make sure your family knows the truth." The ghost's black eyes fixed on me. "You would do this?" "Yes," I promised. "I swear, your family deserves to know. You deserve a proper burial. But if you kill him now, like this, you'll just be a mystery forever." Another ghost story. Let justice be served the right way. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Marcus's labored breathing and the steady drip, drip, drip of water falling from Elena's form. Then, slowly, Elena nodded. Elena's ghost didn't disappear immediately. She stood there, water still pooling around her feet, those black eyes fixed on Marcus Webb like she was memorizing every detail of his face. The old man was pressed back against his hospital bed, his chest heaving, his heart monitor screaming with irregular rhythms. "You tell them," Elena said to me, her voice carrying that strange underwater echo. "You tell them everything he said. Miller's Lake, near the old boat launch. 30 feet down, chained to cinder blocks." She turned back to Marcus. "And you live with this. You live with the fear I lived with in my last moments. Every night when you close your eyes, you see my face. You feel the water filling your lungs. You understand?" Marcus could only nod, tears streaming down his weathered face. Then Elena looked at me one more time. "Thank you," she whispered. And she was gone. not fading slowly like in movies. Just gone. The temperature returned to normal instantly. The pools of dark water evaporated as if they'd never been there, and the lights flickered back to their normal warm glow. I stood there in room 412, my legs shaking, my mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. James appeared in the doorway, Kis Fasipali. Sarah, ... What the fuck was that? Before I could answer, Marcus spoke up, his voice weak and broken. I killed her. I killed Elena Vasquez in 1987. She found out I was embezzling from the post office. Small amounts, but over time, ... thousands. She said she had to report it. We argued in the parking lot after our shift. I didn't plan it. I grabbed her, put her in my trunk, drove to the lake. I weighted her down and watched her sink. I pulled out my phone, miraculously working again, and started recording. Say that again, Mr. Webb. All of it. He did. Every detail. The confession poured out of him like he'd been holding it in for 40 years and couldn't stand the weight anymore. James called the police while I made sure Marcus's vitals were stable. His heart rate was elevated, but not dangerous. Physically, he'd be fine. Mentally, that was another story. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the recording, told them about the police report from 1987, gave them Marcus's confession. They looked at me like I was crazy when I started to explain about the ghost, so I just said Marcus had a breakdown and confessed spontaneously. Let them think what they wanted. But here's what made it real. The next day, they sent divers to Miller's Lake, 30 feet down, near the old boat launch, exactly where Marcus said. They found remains chained to cinder blocks. The medical examiner confirmed they were the remains of Elena Vasquez. The story made national news. Cold case solved after 38 years. Postal worker confesses to 1987 murder. They didn't mention the ghost, of course. The official story was that Marcus, facing his own mortality in the hospital, finally confessed to clear his conscience. Only the nurses on the 4th floor that night knew the truth. Marcus Webb was charged with murder. Even at 73, even with his heart condition, they were going to prosecute. But he died 2 weeks later, before the trial. Heart attack in his jail cell. The gods said he was screaming about water filling his lungs, about drowning, even though there was no water anywhere near him. Elena got her funeral. Her sister, Rosa, who is now 65, finally got to say goodbye. I went to the service, standing in the back of the church. There were photos of Elena everywhere. A beautiful young woman with her whole life ahead of her, stolen by a coward's greed and fear. After the service, Gaza found me. "You're the nurse," she said, "the one who was there when he confessed." "Yes, ma'am." She took my hands in hers. My mother died 10 years ago, never knowing what happened to Elena. She wasted away from grief. But I know, and I want to thank you. Whatever happened that night, whatever you did or said to make him confess, thank you. I couldn't tell her about the ghost, about her sister's spirit coming back for justice. So I just squeezed her hands and said, "Your sister was very brave." Even at the end. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. How do you know that? I realized my mistake, but then I thought maybe she deserved to know something. Because anyone who stands up against corruption, against wrongdoing, even when they know it might cost them everything, that's the definition of bravery. She hugged me then, and I felt some of the tension that had been coiled in my chest since that night finally release. But the story doesn't end there. It never really ends, does it? 3 nights after Elena's funeral, I was back on shift. 4th floor, cardiac unit. Room 412 had a new patient, a woman recovering from a triple bypass. Everything was routine until about 2 a.m. when I walked past 412 and smelled something strange. Flowers. Fresh flowers. Specifically, gardenias. I opened the door to check on my patient. She was sleeping peacefully, her vitals all normal. But on the windowsill, where there definitely hadn't been anything before, sat a single white gardenia in a small glass of water. My patient's chart hadn't mentioned any visitors. And it was Doizain. Visiting hours had ended at 9 p.m. No one could have brought that flower. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. Real. Definitely real. And then I remembered something from Elena's funeral. Her casket had been covered in white gardenias. Rosa had explained they were Elena's favorite flower. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly stepped out. James was making his rounds, checking on patients in the other rooms. "Hey," I called softly. "Did you see anyone go into He shook his head. "Nobody. Why? I showed him the gardenia. His eyes widened. Where did that come from? I think, ... I started, then paused. How do you explain something like this? I think it's a thank you. James stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'd never fully discussed what we saw that night. Some things are too big, too strange, too outside the realm of normal experience to put into words. Over the next few weeks, other nurses started reporting strange occurrences on the 4th floor. Nothing scary, actually. The opposite. Patients who were anxious or in pain would suddenly feel calm. Call buttons would light up seconds before a patient crashed, giving us just enough warning to save their lives. Missing medical equipment would reappear exactly where it was needed. One night, a patient in room 415 told me she'd seen a beautiful woman with long black hair standing at the foot of her bed. She told me everything was going to be okay, the patient said. She said I'd see my grandchildren grow up. And you know what? I believed her. That patient had been given a poor prognosis, but she made a full recovery and was discharged a week later. I think Elena stayed not as a vengeful ghost, but as a protector. She'd spent 38 years in darkness, trapped at the bottom of a lake. Maybe now she wanted to spend her time helping people, making sure others didn't suffer the way she did. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe strange things just happen in hospitals at night, and our brains try to make patterns out of coincidence and chaos. But I don't think so, because every few nights, I still smell gardenias on the 4th floor. And sometimes, when I'm doing my rounds in the early hours of the morning, I catch a glimpse of a woman in a navy blue postal worker's uniform from the 1980s, standing in the hallway, watching over our patients. She never approaches me, never speaks, just watches. And I swear, even though I can never quite see her face clearly in those glimpses, I think she's smiling. The other nurses who were there that night, James, Linda, who was in the ER, Marcus, who was floating between floors, we made a pact. We don't talk about it with outsiders. Hospital administration wouldn't believe us anyway, and we'd probably end up with mandatory psych evaluations. But among ourselves, in whispered conversations during quiet moments on the night shift, we share stories. The patient, Ian Forner 8, who was about to give up but suddenly felt a presence in the room telling her to fight. The elderly man in 419 who said a woman with kind eyes held his hand while he passed away peacefully, even though the monitor showed he should have died in agony. You'd think that after everything that happened with Elena Vasquez, things would go back to normal on the 4th floor. You'd be wrong. About 2 months after Elena's funeral, we got another admission to room 412? I know what you're thinking. Why don't they just close that room? Use it for storage or something. Hospital administration doesn't believe in ghosts, and they're sure as hell not going to lose revenue over nurses' superstitions. The new patient's name was David Chun, 61 years old. Former police detective, he was admitted for an emergency stent placement after a minor heart attack. Nice guy, seemed stable, grateful for the care. Nothing unusual about him at all. Until his second night. I was chatting at the nurse's station when his call button lit up. Not the regular call button, the emergency code blue button. I grabbed the crash cart and ran. When I burst into 412, David was sitting up in bed, perfectly calm, not in any distress at all. But he was staring at the corner of the room with an expression I recognized, the same look Marcus Webb had worn that night. Mr. Chun, did you press the emergency button? He didn't look at me. I didn't press anything, he said quietly, but someone wants you in here. The temperature in the room dropped. Not as dramatically as that night with Elena, but enough that I could see my breath. And then I heard it, a little girl laughing. The kind of laugh that should make you smile, except when you hear it at 3 a.m. in a hospital room and there's no little girl anywhere in sight. Do you hear that? David whispered. Yes, I admitted. No point in lying. I was a detective for 30 years, David said, his eyes never leaving that corner. Homicide? Mainly. Put away a lot of bad people. Solved a lot of cases. He paused. Didn't solve them all. The laughing stopped. A child's voice spoke from the corner, and this time I could see her, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a yellow sundress. She was translucent, just like Elena had been, but she seemed more solid somehow, less traumatized. Detective Chun, the little girl said. Her voice was strange, young, but with an old quality to it, like she'd seen too much. You remember me? David's face crumpled. Lily Martinez, he breathed. 1998. Oh God, Lily. The ghost child smiled sadly. You tried really hard to find me. I watched you. You worked my case for 3 years. We never found you, David said, tears streaming down his face. Your parents, ... They never gave up hope. I never gave up. But we had no leads, no witnesses, no evidence. You just vanished from your front yard. I know, Lily said. It wasn't your fault. I stood frozen by the door, watching this impossible scene unfold. Another ghost. Another unsolved case. What was room for it in some kind of cosmic confessional booth? Why are you here? David asked. Why now? Lily floated closer to the bed. Because you're dying, Detective Chun. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. Your heart is worse than the doctors think. You have maybe 3 months. David nodded slowly, like he'd suspected as much. Okay, I can accept that. But, Lily, please tell me what happened. Let me give your parents closure before I go. The little girl's form flickered, and for a moment, I saw something terrible bruises on her arms, fear in her eyes, then she was back to normal, smiling that sad smile. It was Mr. Peterson. Our neighbor, he said he had puppies in his basement, asked if I wanted to see them. I was only 8. I didn't know about stranger danger when it's someone you know, someone your parents say hello to every day. My hand covered my mouth. David was crying openly now. He kept me in his basement for 3 days, Lily continued. Her voice matter-of-fact, like she was reciting a grocery list. Then he got scared someone would find out. He made it quick. I'm grateful for that. He put me in garbage bags and drove me to the construction site on Moreland Avenue. They were pouring foundation for new houses. He put me in one of the forms before they poured the concrete. Jesus Christ, David whispered. Peterson, Carl Peterson. He was one of the first people we interviewed. He helped organize search parties. I know, Lily said. I watched. He cried fake tears with my parents. But that's where I am. Detective, 2247 Moreland Avenue. The foundation of the last house on the left, he's still alive. You know? Living in Florida now, remarried, has grandkids. I watched David Chun's face transform. The sick, defeated old man disappeared, replaced by the detective he'd been for 30 years. His eyes sharpened, his jaw set. Lily, I swear to you, I will make this right. Before I die, I will make this right. The ghost child smiled, and this time it was a real smile, full of light. I know you will. That's why I came to you. That's why Elena brought me here. Elena, I spoke up for the first time. Lily looked at me. The lady who helps lost spirits, she found me wandering and said there was a detective who could help me. She said this room was special now, a place where truth could be told. Then she was gone, just like Elena had vanished. No dramatic exit, just there 1 second and gone the next. David Chun looked at me. You believe me? Yeah, I said. I believe you. Good, because I'm going to need your help. I need you to be a witness to what she told me. The police won't believe a dying old man having visions in a hospital, but they might listen if a nurse corroborates the information. And that's how I became involved in solving a 27-year-old cold case. David checked himself out of the hospital the next day against medical advice. I gave him my number and told him to call me when he was ready to go to the police. He spent a week gathering his old case files, documenting everything he remembered about Carl Peterson building a case. Then he called me and we went to the police together. They were skeptical at first. Obviously, a retired detective with a bad heart claiming he solved a cold case because a ghost told him in a hospital room. But David was persuasive. He pointed out that they had nothing to lose by checking the foundation at 2247 Moreland Avenue. The houses were old enough that any renovation or foundation inspection would give them an excuse to look. It took 3 weeks to get the warrants and coordinate with the construction crew. They used ground-penetrating radar first and found an anomaly in the foundation exactly where Lily said she'd be. When they broke through the concrete, they found her garbage bags. Just like she said, forensics confirmed the remains were Lily Martinez. Carl Peterson was arrested in Florida. He denied everything at first, but when confronted with the evidence, he broke down and confessed. Said he'd been living with the guilt for 27 years. That seeing his own grandchildren playing had been torture. Always reminded him of what he'd done. He got life without parole. At 73 years old, he'll die in prison. Lily's parents finally got to bury their daughter. I went to the funeral with David. Her mother, who was now 55, held David's hands and sobbed into his chest. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you for never giving up on her." David looked at me over her shoulder, and I nodded. We'd never tell them about the ghost. Let them think it was brilliant detective work. A late-breaking lead, a miracle. It was all of those things, in a way. David died 6 weeks later, exactly like Lily had predicted. Heart failure in his sleep. I heard that his funeral was packed with former colleagues, victims' families, people whose lives he'd touched during his career. I like to think he and Lily are together now, wherever spirits go when their earthly business is finished. He solved her case. She gave him purpose in his final months. Fair trade, but room 412 wasn't done with us. Not even close. The next incident happened just 3 weeks after David's death. New patient, Amanda Foster, 34 years old, admitted for severe chest pain that turned out to be an anxiety attack. Young, healthy, no reason for her to be on a cardiac floor except we were full and it was the only bed available. She should have been discharged the next day. But when I came on shift that night, she was still there, and her chart had a note, patient requesting to stay one more night. Insistent, approved for observation. Weird, but not unheard of. Sometimes people are scared to go home, afraid the symptoms will come back. I'm going to check on her around midnight. Amanda was sitting up in bed, awake.com. But her hands were shaking. "How are you feeling, Ms. Foster?" I asked. "Better," she said. "But I need to tell you something. I saw a little girl in here earlier, and then a woman. They both told me I needed to talk to the night shift nurse. They said you'd understand." My blood ran cold. What did they look like? The little girl was wearing a yellow dress. The woman had long dark hair and was wearing some kind of uniform. They said, ... Amanda's voice broke. They said it was time to tell the truth about my brother. I pulled up a chair and sat down. I'm listening. And Amanda Foster told me about how 15 years ago, her older brother Jake had disappeared. The family assumed he'd run away. He was 18, had been talking about leaving their small town, had withdrawn $1,000 from his savings account the day he vanished. But Amanda had always known the truth. Their stepfather had killed him. "I was 13, Amanda said, staring at her hands. I heard them arguing in the garage. Jake had found out our stepfather was stealing from his college fund. Jake threatened to tell Mom, to go to the police, and my stepfather, he hit him so hard, Jake fell, hit his head on the concrete floor. There was so much blood." She started crying. I watched through the window. I saw my stepfather panic wrap Jake's body in a tarp, put him in the trunk. I saw him take Jake's wallet, his phone, stage it to look like he ran away. And I never said anything. I was 13 and scared, and he said if I told anyone, he'd do the same to me. "Where did he take Jake?" I asked gently. "Our property backed up the state forests," Amanda said. There was an old dried up, well, about half a mile into the woods. He dropped Jake down there and filled it in with rocks and dirt. "Amanda, you were a child. You were threatened. This wasn't your fault. I know that now," she said. "I'm in therapy. I'm working through it. But Jake deserves better. My mother deserves to know what happened to her son. And my stepfather is still alive, still free, still going to family dinners and pretending to wonder what happened to Jake." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "The little girl and the woman, the ones I saw, they said you'd help me. They said you'd know what to do. They said this room was where secrets come to light." I thought about Elena, about Lily, about the impossible things I'd witnessed in this room. Truth and justice and spirits who couldn't rest until the living set things right. "Okay," I said, "here's what we're going to do. I need to pause here and tell you something important. What's been happening in room 412? It's not random. After Amanda Foster, after we helped her report her stepfather and they found Jake's remains in that old well, I started to see the pattern. Elena Vasquez wasn't just haunting room 412. She was running it like some kind of supernatural crisis center for unsolved crimes and guilty convicts. And somehow, the hospital room itself had become a thin place. A spot where the barrier between the living and the dead was permeable enough for spirits to cross over. But only spirits with unfinished business. I'm not a religious person. I wasn't raised going to church every Sunday or believing in heaven and hell. But after months of this, I've come to believe in something. Justice. Maybe, or balance, ouviu? Que se tal? The idea that some wrongs are so deep, so fundamental, that the universe itself bends to correct them. Let me tell you about the others who came through room 412. There was Michael Torres, 47. Admitted for a second night in the room, he was visited by his high school girlfriend, Stephanie, who'd died in a car accident senior year. Everyone thought it was weather-related, icy roads, lost control, hit a tree. But Stephanie's ghost told Michael the truth. Her brakes had been cut by her stepbrother, who had been abusing her and was afraid she was about to tell. Michael had always suspected something was off about that accident. With Stephanie's information, he convinced the police to reopen the case. They found evidence the stepbrother had worked as a mechanic. He'd had the knowledge and opportunity. Under pressure, he confessed. There was Jennifer Wu, 52, chest pain that turned out to be GERD. She was visited by her college roommate, Allison, who'd supposedly committed suicide 20 years ago. Except Allison told Jennifer it wasn't suicide. Her boyfriend at the time had killed her during an argument and staged it to look like she'd hanged herself. He was now a successful lawyer, married with kids, respected in the community. Jennifer went to the police with enough details that they reopened the investigation. New forensic techniques revealed signs of a struggle that had been missed the first time. The boyfriend was arrested. There was Robert Price, 68, recovering from a mild heart attack. He was visited by his business partner from 30 years ago, Thomas, who'd allegedly embezzled money and fled to South America. But Thomas's ghost revealed he'd never stolen anything or run anywhere. Robert's brother had killed him over a woman they'd both been involved with, framed him for embezzlement, and buried him in the woods behind their office building. Robert broke down and helped the police find the remains. His brother was arrested. Each case, the same pattern: someone with guilt or knowledge they'd been carrying, visited by a spirit with information, the truth finally coming to light. And each chimi, I'd catch a glimpse of Elena Vasquez in the hallway, watching with those dark eyes, making sure justice was served. The hospital administration started to notice something weird was going on. Not the ghosts, they never believed in that, but the statistical anomaly that patients in room 412 kept checking out and immediately going to the police with information about cold cases. They thought maybe there was some kind of true crime podcast playing in the room, suggesting ideas to vulnerable patients. They investigated, found nothing, and eventually just shrugged it off as coincidence. But James and I knew, the other nurses who worked the night shift knew, we'd all seen too much to deny it. Room 412 had become a place of reckoning, and then things got complicated. 3 months after Amanda Foster's case, we admitted Patricia Donovan to 412. 79 years old, congestive heart failure, probably didn't have more than a few weeks left. Retired teacher, widow, 4 kids, and 11 grandkids who took turns staying with her around the clock. The family was lovely, attentive, caring, always making sure Patricia was comfortable. The kind of deathbed vigil you love to see as a nurse, a family pulling together, making peace, saying goodbye properly. But on Patricia's 4th night, something changed. Her daughter Susan was staying overnight, dozing in the chair next to the bed when I came in to check vitals around 2 a.m. Susan was awake, pale, staring at something I couldn't see. "Are you okay?" I asked. Susan turned to me with wide eyes. "There's a boy standing in the corner. Maybe 16 or 17. He's looking at my mother." I felt that familiar chill. What does he look like? Blonde hair, wearing jeans and a red jacket. He keeps saying, "Mrs. Donovan, I forgave you a long time ago. You can let go." Patricia was awake too, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Dylan," she whispered. "Dylan Harris." Susan grabbed her mother's hand. "Mom, who's Dylan Harris?" And Patricia told a story that made my blood run cold. In 1973, Patricia had been a 27-year-old teacher at Jefferson High School. She'd been having an affair with the principal.